Wait, before you listen to this episode, I just had to tell you about our new free mini wealth building training. In this training, we're covering the first steps to building wealth, how to find your personalized wealth path, how to find and analyze deals, and then some. So don't miss out on this free training. I mean, what do you have to lose? It's free. Sign up at www.abundantculture.co/newsletter. Don't let delay get in the way of your abundant year. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back to Abundant Culture Podcast,
where we dissect the mindsets and tactics of the true beasts of business.
People like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, and Warren Buffett.
All to create a blueprint to experience life more abundantly.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast and happy 100th episode. Happy New Year. We haven't talked to you guys personally in like a really long time, and this is our first recording of 2021. So we wanted to give you guys just like a little behind the scenes of what's been going on in our business and a couple things that happened for us in 2020. So it's kind of like a year-end review and also like why we're doing the business things that we're doing for 2021. So let's get started.
Yeah, so like Jasmine touched on before, one of the things we're doing going into 2021 is we're actually rebranding our podcast. And I don't know how many of you know the origin story behind the podcast, but I'll give you a little bit of that origin story and tell you why we're taking it in a slightly different direction. So basically, I believe it was in 2018.
19.
It was 2019 when we went to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 2019?
Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy. So in 2019, we went to the event that Grant Cardone holds every single year called the 10X Growth Con. And it was just an amazing experience for us. A lot of people, honestly, and it's kind of understandable, but a lot of people do not necessarily like Grant Cardone. But I think he's one of those individuals who bring more positivity into the world than negativity. So the good outweighs the bad for me. So, and I like him a lot. He's very entertaining. But we were really big into going to different networking events in 2019. I mean, we were going to, sometimes 2 or 3 networking events a week. That was actually pretty average for us. Sometimes we went to multiple networking events in a single day. And I forget how we found out about the 10X Growth Con, but we started following Grant Cardone, and I guess we just heard about it. And it was something that we really wanted to go to because we like Grant, and it was a place where we could probably get a lot of decent networking done.
And then also it was Florida. Who doesn't want to go to Florida?
Yeah, plus it was Florida. And I think the time where he held it was like super, super cold up here. So it was nice to get out of the cold. Mm-hmm. So we went to 10X Growth Con and we had an absolute blast because it was everything that we like. I mean, warm weather. We were close to Miami, so it was like nice cars everywhere. People who know me know I love cars, but we were in a business setting, but it was also fun, which is something that Abundant Culture and me and Jasmine has always been about. We love business, we love making money, but we think that you should have fun doing that. There's this kind of idea in the business world where everything's just so serious and uptight. But if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs nowadays, like I just spoke to a guy a couple months ago who had a business that did over 2 million a year. I dressed better than that guy. I showed up in a polo, nice pair of jeans and some nice shoes. He showed up in a jogging suit every single time that we met. And he talked like a football coach, not like you would think a $2 million business owner would speak. And we found that. So I think the 10X Growth Con was awesome because it was enough. It was like business mixed with pleasure. It was fun, but it was also business. You learned a lot. So we totally enjoyed that event. It was a lot of people coming out, a lot of different famous people, business people, and different things of that nature. But the thing that it did for us that was most important, besides being entertaining and educational, is that it started to change the way that we thought about things. Mm-hmm. We realized from the 10X Growth Con that we were thinking way smaller than we actually needed to. And another thing we realized is that we weren't as visible to the media or the outside world as we needed to be. I think a lot of people have this mindset that, oh, I'm gonna just keep my head down, work, and not speak to anybody, and then I'm gonna become successful, and then I want everybody to see me.
Mhm.
I think that's not the best approach. I do believe that you should not reach a certain amount of fame until you do a certain amount of work. But I also believe there's a balance, because I don't think you should just not speak to anybody until you're successful, because you need to talk to people so that they can help you to be successful in whatever you're trying to do. So me and Jasmine just wanted to be more public, more out there. And we thought about it, like, how could we do that? And I think our first idea was to start a YouTube channel. And I
Well,
think,
at the time, yeah, at the time we were doing the YouTube channel. Like we were actually doing a vlog challenge while
yeah.
we were there. So that was pretty cool. But we realized that we didn't really like the way that we had to be for YouTube. Like
Mhm.
you guys probably know this because you're listening to the podcast, that podcasting and YouTube is like so different.
Yeah.
On YouTube, you literally like they cut out every single and like they cut out a little tiny breath. It's like nonstop. Like you have to be like on your feet. You just cannot relax and just have a conversation. It's like just too fast paced, and we don't like that
Yeah.
for
So
ourselves anyway.
yeah, so I realized that I was more of a long form conversation type person, and I think Jasmine was too. So instead of just staying on YouTube, we were thinking to ourselves, what if we can have more long, intimate conversations with people to actually get to know them better, and to get to explain our viewpoints better than we can in a 5-minute video. And that's when we came up with the idea to have the podcast. Now, a little fun fact: before we went to 10x GrowthCon, I believe the first time, we were actually, our company was the Mims Group Incorporated. We spoke to this really cool couple named Isabella and Vanessa, right,
Mhm.
from Ivy Leads. And we told them that we wanted to change our name, but we couldn't, really think about what we wanted our name to be. And one of the cool things they did was just listen to our vision and our values and different things of that nature. And it was like, man, what if you called yourself Abundant Culture? So the Abundant Culture name didn't even come from us. It came from other people, which is why it's another reason why it's super, super important to network. So we changed our company to Abundant Culture. And then right when that happened, we had the idea to do a podcast.
And we did that like all in the same week. As soon
All
as
in
we touched down back in Chicago.
Yep, all in the same week. So, with the Abundant Culture podcast, the original vision of it was, hey, we were still young in business, and I think when you're young in business, especially when your main motivation for starting a business is to build wealth or have money. Don't get me wrong, I think that's a great reason to start. It's not going to be a good enough reason to keep you going, but that was our reason, and we were just starting out. Now we have other reasons to be in business, but that was our initial reason. But we didn't really know what we didn't know at the end of the day, and we just wanted to be in a position where we can be constantly learning. And I think those first couple years in business, you're trying to figure out, what can you do? And I think the podcast was a great vehicle and resource for us, because we were able to interview tons of people from multiple different industries and backgrounds. And through the podcast and through everything we were studying and just living, we found out that you can literally make money or be in business doing anything.
Yeah.
Like literally, we've interviewed people who owned lobster companies.
A magician,
A magician, a
a
stylist.
stylist.
Yeah, people who own hotels. We have seen so many interesting and crazy business models that what we found is that it doesn't really matter what industry you pick. You can make money doing anything. So once we found out that literally you can do anything you want in business. And at the time, we were mainly focusing on real estate, but we wanted to get to know other small business owners, hear their stories and their strategies about, how they grew their companies and things of that nature.
Because we did sign up with the coffee shops at the time. We weren't operating yet, but we did sign the contract and
Yeah.
pay and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So after a little while of just doing the interviews and living our lives, we eventually had the chance to start operating those coffee shops. And we realized that we liked business a lot more than we liked just real estate in general. Because if you ask me anything about just real estate, I can't tell you anything, but I can tell you how to put together a team and put together, bring together the things that you need in order to do a deal. I can tell you that, but I can't really tell you like what's wrong with a building or should it have a flat roof or pitched roof. I have no idea about any of those things. So we realized that we love business. And then we were like, what if we just bought other businesses? Because we realized how complicated startups could be from our own experiences. And I think any business is complicated in its own way, but we bought a business that already had revenue. So there was already a foundation there. And it was something that we were like, if it's worth doing once, maybe it's worth doing a couple times.
But we
So
didn't come to that realization probably until like the end of 2019, right?
yeah,
And that was when we actually did have our first business acquisition. It was the second coffee shop that we have, because it was already operating
yeah.
and the manager was in place. It was like almost like a dream come true. It
Yeah.
was like, wow, I don't have to do nothing.
Yeah. So, and that's really the cool part about, I think, buying businesses is if you do it correctly, you have all this revenue coming in. Now, there's a lot of things we did wrong, and we could save that for
Yes.
another episode because that's like a 3-part series by itself.
Mhm.
But one thing that was really cool was we had all this revenue coming in, but we weren't necessarily working all that much for it. You have to oversee the asset, but I mean, that's kind of like a couple hours a week type gig. Like really, you're probably working 1 day a week.
And then like the things that we didn't even know, we got help. Like the manager that was there, our old manager, she knew the operation. So when I had a question, I could just ask the manager.
Yeah, which is awesome. And what it showed us is that you didn't even need to know everything about an industry in order to capitalize in that industry, which was super, super awesome. But as we were learning all these things, eventually we decided that we wanted to basically start a private equity fund, which is basically a fund that pulls together capital from different high net worth individuals and investors and goes out and buys, operates, and grows various different types of businesses. And then it distributes the capital that it makes from operations to its investors and the managers, which would be us. So we literally in a couple years went from, oh, I want to wholesale real estate to basically becoming private equity fund managers in a very, very short period of time. And a lot of growth happened in between those 2 points. And what we started to notice is that we liked the idea of having a podcast still, but it started to become a drag because we couldn't figure out a way to really incorporate it into our business. At the end of the day, I love this podcast, but if there's a meeting that I can have with a seller or an investor, I don't want to do the podcast that day.
It was like it was becoming a chore.
Yeah, it was
Like
becoming a chore.
you love to eat, but you don't like to wash the dishes.
Exactly. And the thing about it is that the podcast started out as something fun that we just wanted to do, but then it started to become a chore, and we were trying to figure out, okay, how can we hold on to this and how can we keep doing this, but do it in a way that serves us, that motivates us to do it better and do it even more.
Because people, like a lot of people probably don't know the time that it takes to like put in for a podcast. Like you have to record it, you have to schedule the recording, you have to have like, well, if you want to be super professional and organized and everything, like have the systems in place for the scheduling and questions and
Yeah.
like all the transfer of information, and then you have to edit it. And if you don't have like someone to edit for you, that is not fun. I used to edit our podcast like probably for the first year and a half. Like we just hired our VA a couple of
Yeah.
months ago, and I was so
Yeah.
happy I did that. That was like the best decision ever,
Yeah.
because she saved so much time. But and then after the editing, you have to publish it, put it on social media. It's a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that we started to really notice about the podcast was that the podcast wasn't necessarily growing with us.
Mhm.
And the thing about it is when you're doing something that you used to enjoy, but that endeavor isn't growing, isn't keeping up with your growth. Like, we were here when we, started the, podcast, but then we went up levels and the podcast didn't go up levels with us. So it started to become this chore and kind of this drag on our time. But we knew that it was still something that was useful. We just didn't really know how to use it. So we were able to talk to this one individual, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name at all, but he was in the podcast space and he was just asking us questions about our podcast, mainly Jasmine, because I had got to the point where I was like super tired dealing with the podcast. Not that I didn't like it, it was just this obligation sometimes, and it was like just kind of too much for me. And I kind of had my ideas about what we should do, but
We
I
just
wasn't
weren't
really
on the
sure.
same page yet.
Yeah, and we weren't on the same page yet. So he was asking Jasmine a bunch of questions and basically got her to the point where she was able to kind of articulate the new vision for the podcast and direction that we should take it in. And just so you guys know, this change in regards to the podcast won't necessarily look huge for you. There will be a small difference for you, but for us is going to be a huge difference.
It's
And
more of like an internal than an external rebranding.
yeah, exactly. So it's still going to be called the Abundant Culture Podcast. We're still going to interview small business owners. But the questions, the types of questions that we ask and the types of people that we interview will be being tweaked a little bit. So some of you may notice a little bit, some of you might barely notice at all. But what we came to the conclusion of is that, okay, if we're going to continue doing this podcast, we're going to need to tie this into our business. It's going to have to become something that helps our core business, which is buying, funding, and growing different small businesses. So what we're going to be doing moving forward is we're going to become
More
more
strict on the guest criteria.
yeah.
So like what that looks like is majority of our guests moving forward will have a small business that grosses between 500,000 and
No,
$500,000.
5 million.
I'm sorry, $500,000 to $5 million in gross sales. So they have some extreme success to a lot of us. And then they also, what was the other one? They won't be a smoke shop because we don't, it just doesn't align with our values. So it would be hard for us to talk about a smoke shop.
Yeah. They also won't be part of a franchise because even though we do have a coffee shop franchise, and we could talk about this a little bit more if you wanted to contact me individually, but there's some downsides to owning a franchise that we don't personally like anymore.
Not to say that it's a bad investment.
No, it's not a bad investment
There's
at
still a
all.
lot of pros.
But it's basically it's a personal preference type thing. So I could tell you why I wouldn't do franchises, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do franchises. It's just based on our personal experience. We prefer independently owned businesses to franchises.
And then last but not least, they have a team because we know how important it is to talk to others about how to run teams. Like we ran into a lot of problems in this area because we went from solopreneurs to like business owners with a team of between 4 and 6 at any given time.
Yeah. I
And
think we
now
had
we're
as
at,
many as 7 employees at one point in time.
well, now we have 7 because
We have 7?
including the our VA.
Oh, okay. So
So
did we have 8 or 9 at one point in
yeah, I
time?
guess we had 8 employees at one time.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of challenges. So moving forward, like with the podcast, Joe said that the questions will be a tad bit different. And what he means by that is like we'll have more questions about like the operations, how they overcome certain challenges, maybe walking us through a story that they had to overcome in their business, or
Yeah.
how a story can relate to you guys, because we want this podcast to not only benefit ourselves, but more importantly them and you as well. Like
Yeah.
we want this to be a hub for learning for small business owners, so that they can grow the value of their companies, and then also for you guys to grow your portfolios as well. Because we're now moving forward, this podcast is going to be for 2 people. And the first one is a small business owner that would potentially like to sell their company somewhere down the line, and they want to increase the value because they want to get that maximum amount of price that they can get. And then the second one is people that are interested in passively investing in small businesses, because we can probably have a whole episode on this, but we absolutely love small business investing, period, passively and actively. And we even have a PDF for you guys if you're interested. We'll link it in the show notes for you guys to download, and you can learn why and passively investing in small businesses is a really, really great investment.
Yeah, I would even argue that it's the absolute best investment. That's my argument. You don't need to share my thought process, but in my PDF, I
We're
do
like
actually have
that guy with the
proof.
sign where it's like small business passive investing is the best investment. Argue with me or something like that. You know, it's like that meme.
Oh yeah, change my mind is
Yeah,
what you mean?
change my mind.
Yeah. I would say that it's the best investment. And going back to what she said about having a team, preferably we'll be interviewing people who have 5 or more employees. Now, the reason why we had that criteria, 500,000 to 5 million in yearly or annual sales, not a franchise, not a smoke shop, and has 5 or more employees. The reason why we have that criteria is for a very specific reason. And this is my favorite part. You might not care about it, but it's definitely my favorite part, is because we want to specifically interview people whose companies that we would buy.
That's the intern.
Yes. So if you hear me a lot more motivated on podcast episodes, is because while I'm listening to this person, one, they're probably interesting if they fit that criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just cool to talk to in general. But two, I'm also hearing cha-ching and dollar signs go off because like that is the type of company that my private equity fund would actually like to buy. So basically our podcast is still going to be at the core of it a small business podcast. That's what it's going to be about.
Mm-hmm.
But behind the scenes, hopefully I'm actually going to be negotiating with these people to one day sell their company to me at a somewhat reasonable price. And also, if somebody has companies that fit that criteria, there's a good chance that they may be a accredited investor, meaning that they have $1 million net worth, or have made $200,000 in the past 2 years and plan to do so moving forward as a single person, or made $300,000 the past 2 years and plan to do so moving forward as a married couple. And that's who my fund will actually target as investors, because the federal government says that's the only way that I could actually advertise my fund the way that I want to, which kind of sucks. I wish they would change that. But hey, I didn't make the rules. I'm just playing the game. So that's another reason why we're basically targeting those 2 types of people, because those are the people who will actually help our business grow. People who may own those types of companies and they want to diversify their portfolio into other small businesses, and also people who have a business and they want to exit it. They want to retire. They want to go to Florida and not pay any state income tax or whatever the case may be, but they need to sell their business. And we can help them with that. And part of the reason we want to help with that is because a lot of good businesses have to close their doors every single year because they can't find a suitable buyer. And that's heartbreaking for me because I truly believe that all wealth, all innovation has some small business at its foundation. Even, people hate and love Jeff Bezos because he owns like the biggest corporation on the face of the planet.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we got to remember Amazon started out as a small business. And I think, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Amazon still buys other small businesses from time to time, depending on what your definition of small business is, because the definitions range a little bit. So yeah, that's gonna be how we move our podcast forward. That's how we're gonna interview. Those are gonna be the types of people we interview moving forward. People who fit that criteria, and it's gonna be a little bit more strategic. We want to give you guys more strategic information because
And more deep level
yeah,
information as
yeah,
well.
instead of being really surface level, we want to help you guys actually take away pieces of information that you can use to grow the value of your own business. Because I don't at the end of the day, your business can be an asset if you grow it the way you're supposed to.
So if you have like specific questions that you would like us to answer within the podcast, either with guests or ourselves, then just shoot us an email. We'll be more than happy to talk about it.
Yep.
And last but not least, we wanted to give you guys a couple of our developmental things that we went through in 2020. And I do want to wrap it up because another thing that we're doing with the podcast is we want to make them a little bit shorter, just so you guys are able to get through the full episode. So we'll try to range between 30 and 40 minutes on average, but this one we're trying to stop at 30 minutes. So with that being said, I'll just go with my personal development for 2020. So I lost 20 pounds. So exciting. That was crazy. I didn't think that would happen, that I would be able to do it and stick to it that long. And I did that. I like downloaded the Noom app. I had that for a while. And then I did 2 rounds of insanity workouts with Sean T. So that was like 4 months straight of doing insanity workouts. And it was like literally insane. I was like outside in the cold and it was like raining some days. It even started snowing towards the end of the workout. So I'm so happy I'm done with it. I'll restart that probably like in a month or two. And then another one, I did a lot of Bible study. I really haven't like did my own personal Bible study like ever. I only got the word through church, but since church was closed last year, I took it upon myself to like learn and study God's word on my own. And I learned a lot. And honestly, it was really fun. I looked forward to it. It was a part of my morning routine along with like journaling and then working out as well. So I had like huge personal development milestones hit last year despite everything that happened.
Yeah. I will say I have a lot, but I think there's probably two that's more important than anything. One, I became a lot more disciplined this year, and I think that translates
Last year.
or last year. And I think that translate into personal and business. Like I run every single day, no matter how I feel, no matter what the weather is outside. And among other things, I also try to study the Bible or something in business every single day as well. And I think that just makes me a better person. And I think, life is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think the most disciplined people are traditionally the ones who come out on top most of the time.
Yeah.
So I want to be one of those people. So I wanted to really focus on my discipline as of last year. And I'm still keeping that up until this year.
And what day are you on your runs? Like 700 or something?
Yeah, I'm on run 700 and something because I actually started in 2019, I think, right?
I don't know. It
No,
was a long
I
time ago.
started in 2018.
2018
I
in
started,
December or
yeah, I
something.
started in December 2018, ran every day 2019, ran every day in 2020, and now I'm on 2021. So,
Rain, sleet, snow, or sunshine.
yep. One,
Even on our wedding day, he went to sleep and then woke up in the middle of the night and was mad because he forgot.
yeah, and I had to go run. That really sucked. Um, so I think discipline is something that is going to help me for the rest of my life, and I think I'm really getting used to being uncomfortable, and that kind of ties into my next development. And I think the next development, it's kind of dark, but I think is really necessary, and that is getting used to the ugliness of business and personal life. And what I mean by that is that in 2020, if you haven't seen how ugly life can be, like you must have been asleep the whole entire time.
You must live out in the
Because
country somewhere with.
yeah, and I'm not saying that it was bad for everybody. I think a lot of people had a good year in 2020, or at least some people that I've heard of. And in some ways, I've had a good year. But just then, if you look on social media, if you look at TV, if you just go out and sit outside long enough, if you live in a populated area, you will see ugliness in the world. People being really mean and deceitful and backstabbing and stuff like that. And I used to think that the world, and don't get me wrong, I do think that the world should be fair, but I think in 2020, I've accepted the reality that the world isn't fair. And I think that was huge for me because it allowed for me to really look at people as being really good and really bad at the same time. Because I've had people in my life in 2020 that are really good people, but they have done really, really screwed up things to either somebody else or even me. And I think I used to judge people solely on their actions. So if they did something good, they were a good person. If they did something bad, they were a bad person. At the end of the day, the truth is kind of somewhere in the middle. They're not good, they're not bad, they just are. And what they chose to do that time is not really indicative of the person that they are. It's just the path that they chose to take in their actions. So like moving forward, and we can even talk about this at a later date, some of the issues that I had with different employees that I had in the past, being able to look at somebody who's on my team and know that, all right, I'm going to trust you, but I'm also going to put measures in place, devices in place that make it so that if you screw me over, you kind of screw yourself over as well. Because at the end of the day, I trust you today and maybe you trust me, but that doesn't mean that you can't cross me tomorrow or next week. And you really have to think that way in business. And it's one of the, I think, dark truths that a lot of people don't like to touch on, but it's the reality of the situation. You're going to have people in your life who are, don't get me wrong, they're good people, but they can screw you over. So I've almost come to not really expect it, but not be surprised by it when it happens. But I also put things in place so that they're incentivized not to do that. So that's one of the things I developed in 2020. And I think is going to make me a lot stronger for 2021.
Yeah. And both of our developments actually help each other a lot. Like when he brings that up, it's like, oh well, yeah, I kind of developed in that area too. I had to. And he developed in his health and Bible study as well. Like when I talk to him about the things that I've learned, one of the perks of being married and business partners.
Yeah.
So we get the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Make sure you send us any questions you have that we can answer for you in future episodes, and subscribe, rate, and review. That would be awesome. So we'll see you next time.
See ya. So that's all we have for today, folks. I hope you got as much value out of this as we did. Keep in mind, the only way we can improve is through constructive feedback. So remember to rate and review this episode. Also, you are not the only person that needs to know this super valuable information. So be sure to subscribe and share as well. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember to always spread abundance. Peace.